And I wanted to actually start in 2019 when Packy made a very bold pledge to himself that he would become less boring. And I think, like many of us, I can definitely relate to this. Work had kind of become a very all-consuming thing. It's very easy to become kind of one-dimensional when you're working really hard, and especially if you work in tech startups, you kind of know the culture. It's very immersive. And basically, Packy about a year and a half ago decided, like, wow, I've kind of let work take over. I want to maybe I want to work on rounding myself out a bit, and decided to, as it was one of the things he would do, start writing more online. And if you're familiar with David Perell and Rite of Passage, Packy was one of, I think, in the first cohort of David Perell's Rite of Passage, which is this really awesome online writing course. And since doing that, he's basically shipped a written piece of content, an essay, a newsletter, every single week since then. So he's really kind of become a prolific writer. And in the meantime, he's also built kind of a really loyal following and readership around his ideas. So I am like thrilled to be talking with Packy. And Packy's newsletter is called Not Boring. He made a pledge to become not boring. So Packy, I was actually going to start there. What does it mean to be boring? And how do you think about its opposite?
For sure. Well, thanks so much, first of all, for having me here. This is really exciting and wild that you guys are all here. So I'm excited for this. But yeah, I think you nailed it, right? Like, I was at a company called Breather for 6 years. At one point, I was our only employee in the US. Then I grew a team and led a big team. And throughout the whole process, Monday through Sunday, 7 a.m. through 9 p.m., my focus was on this company. The product worked around the clock, and so I worked around the clock. And I got really good at running a real estate startup, but that was kind of it. And there's so many other things that I'm interested in, I love to read, and then I would read a book, think about work, and forget what I just read. And so decided that I wanted to start just experimenting more and playing more, and writing was a really good way to do that. So I remember I was in one of our exec team meetings last year, and I said the word enumerate, like as in illiterate with numbers. And everybody on the exec team looked at me like I was crazy and didn't know what the word meant. And I was like, I need to get out of here and start writing. And so I decided to take this, as you mentioned, the Rite of Passage course, and start going for it. And have written something every week since. And so what I like about writing from the perspective of being not boring, and there's a whole lot about a social club in there around not boring and other stuff we can talk about, but is that writing is this, it's heavy, it takes a lot of time and all of that, but it's this really lightweight way to explore and experiment with a lot of different things. Like I think in a lot of ways, writing is a really good MVP for other things. So one of the things I wanted to do after leaving Not Boring leaving Breather was start this club called the Not Boring Club, which is essentially like extracurriculars for grown-ups in the city. And so to do that, I researched community and how social clubs work, and wrote about it and whether they're investable, and use that to get feedback on the ideas, to get interest from people. So it was this, eventually what that would have turned into without coronavirus was this really heavy, expensive physical club. So to have writing as kind of this thing where I could experiment and see if it resonated with people first is just the best possible way to test ideas.
Yeah, I'm really curious too, in the context of writing. So there's this idea of, not being boring on this broader scale and really having a wider range of interests and of connections. I am curious in a lot of folks on the call are writing their own newsletters. They're getting started, maybe doing some more blogging and sharing their ideas online. And I'm curious in the context of maybe writing, how do you think of, being interesting? And for you, a lot of your work is very just fun to read. And so I'm just curious how you think about writing in a way that matches the name.
Totally. So I think I am doing one of the more cliche things. And so I think would maybe take a step back. One of the best advices that comes out of that course is finding your personal monopoly. It's the thing that you're uniquely suited to write about. And if you're not in an industry that's very specific, then maybe pick 4 things that you're interested in and combine them. And for me, I tried a bunch of different things over the past year. I wrote about community. I wrote about real estate. I wrote a little bit about business. I wrote about books that I was reading. And none of it felt kind of natural. I was trying to avoid writing about business strategy because there are so many writers who write about business strategy. And I probably read 30 people that I really love who write about business strategy. So finally, I realized that my unique take was not going to be writing about a totally different topic, but writing about that topic in a more fun and approachable way. And so to me, that's what Not Boring is about, is taking this thing that a bunch of people write about and a bunch of people are familiar with and trying to both, put a unique spin on it, actually make a really solid case in everything that I'm writing about, but do it in a way that people are like, oh, I didn't expect that you were going to talk about the movie She's All That. Now I actually understand the Gartner hype cycle more, because that's what happens to characters in pretty much every movie. So like little things like that make the lesson stick and it make a topic that can be dry a little bit more fun, is what the style has kind of become.
Yeah, I was going to say, so like weaving in pop culture, I think is something you do pretty brilliantly with a lot of these pieces. Would you kind of define that as part of your personal monopoly and like the style that really works for folks? I think a lot of people, might be in that same bucket of a lot of people write about what I talk about, but I just haven't quite found my spin. So I would be curious to hear a bit more if you could elaborate.
For sure. And Jess said you're giddy just talking about it. I'd say you found your niche. And I think that's so true. And like, I think more importantly than finding something unique is finding something that you absolutely love writing about. And so I think like that was maybe the biggest lesson for me, was coming back to the place that I probably wanted to start in the first place. Because if you're going to write every week, every other week, thousands of words, spend the hours and hours, all of kind of the nerves, and I really legitimately thought I was an idiot for writing for the first 6 months that I was doing it. If you're going to do all that, you better like what you're doing. So that, I think, is just an aside, and I think Jess is absolutely right. Like that's why I like doing this so much. But yeah, the pop culture thing, I just started doing it in a couple of different cases, and it's a way that I think I just naturally think about topics. I'm like, oh, it's kind of like this thing. And wait, actually, that's like a way more fun way to describe this thing. So I talked about Schumpeter's Gale, or creative destruction, by talking about the Mickey Mouse Club. And so you can take like Joseph Schumpeter and like this economic concept that's fairly dry, and then apply it to the Mickey Mouse Club, and people are like, oh, cool, yeah, I kind of get it. It's like when the Mickey Mouse Club broke up, and then it unleashes all of this potential. So I started doing that. I'm not religious about it. If there's a topic that just makes more sense in a straightforward way, and I can just kind of throw some memes in and like throw some jokes in, then that works too. But if there's a way to describe something in a more approachable way, I try to do it that way.
Yeah, that's actually something that I think is interesting with being an internet writer, is that you can combine a lot of different kind of mediums. I think there's a temptation to just bring the long form, college essay onto a blog. And I think something that's really cool with your work is that you've really done this interesting kind of multimedia approach, if you will, where there's really interesting, hilarious GIFs, there's images, you become a half graphic designer with some of these great, visualizations of ideas. So I guess I'm curious how you would encourage other folks to maybe combine these different mediums to communicate ideas, and go maybe outside of just purely writing them down using the written word.
Totally. I think it really depends on what you're writing about and what your style is. Like if I were really going just kind of like hardcore finance, I think that you could probably do interactive graphs. Like if I were a better coder and I wrote more tightly about finance, I would love to have models kind of integrated and embedded into what I write that people could play with to understand the concepts. And so like that's what I would do if I were doing that. For me, because I'm writing about kind of more fun topics and I take a funnier approach to it, memes work really, really well. They're shareable. The combination of memes and then graphics that tell an interesting thing. So whether that's like a graph comparing two different things that you think are similar but actually aren't, anything visual I think just resonates, particularly because I write 3,000 to 4,000 word essays. You need something fun in there to break it up. But I think it's really about finding something other than just words that fits your style. If you're writing prose, maybe that's like beautiful illustrations, like something else to mix it up. I would love to get into more video, and I love kind of even this format, so like more conversational type podcasts. Like anything that works with the style of writing and enhances it, I think is really good. Anything that maybe distracts, I think maybe isn't good. Like if I were writing something very serious and throwing graphics in, I wouldn't approach it that way. I wrote, during the protests and about George Floyd, I wrote an essay kind of on that and didn't put any graphics in because it's not appropriate, obviously. And so it really depends what you're writing about. But I think playing with mediums, seeing what works. I've tried a million different things over the past 15 months and have kind of landed on this by just messing around with Figma. Again, it's something that I just have fun doing. So I do it. Like if I need a break from the writing, I'll go to Figma and start just pulling together graphics.
Awesome. So yeah, I'm curious when you sit down to actually choose about like what the heck am I going to write about next. I think a lot of folks may have over time slowly discovered their area of competence, maybe what they want to write about. They've got some decent idea of like the Venn diagram of where they should kind of focus their attention. But presumably business and strategy, even though it's a niche, can still be fairly broad. And there's a lot of stuff you could write about. I'm really curious just to hear about your ideation process and basically like how the heck do you pick what you're going to invest all the time to create an essay around?
Yeah, I'm open to tips on this one as well, because I'll start something early in the week. So I publish on Mondays my longer form pieces, and then Thursday is more of an experimental day. But for the Monday pieces, I pretty much don't start writing until like Thursday afternoon or Friday morning. And I pretty much don't know what I'm going to write about until Thursday afternoon or Friday morning. So I have a backlog of ideas that over time I'll want to write about. Like I'm dying to write a piece on Mischief, the company / collective out of Brooklyn. At some point I'll do that, but then something pops up. So like last week I wrote about, or this week, yesterday, I wrote about Twitter because last week their stock popped after being like pretty boring for a while, popped on the news that they might be doing a subscription product. And so that becomes timely. Or I wrote about Snap after they did the Snap Partner Summit. So I try to find things that aren't totally overdone and too written about, but that at least have some relevance in what's going on. But for example, there's downsides 100% to this style. Like because I probably spend 20 to 30 hours writing each one of these pieces, tried to bring in somebody to help, like a college student to help with the research side of it. And he did a great job researching a bunch of points for an article that I want to write at some point, but it's been sitting on the shelf for the past 3 weeks because each week there's something that just grabs my attention more on like Friday afternoon. And then my wife is going to kill me because I then spend all of Saturday and all of Sunday and then first thing Monday morning getting this thing done. So it's really like what grabs me. I think if I think something's interesting, at least, a good portion of the audience will think it's interesting as well.
Yeah, it's something. This is actually something we talked about with Nathan Biches and Dan Shipper and everything, which is like, how do you think about maybe timeless content? So for anybody who hasn't read it, Packy wrote this essay called "Cultivating Genius" about kind of the communities, if you will, of really sharp folks that get together throughout periods of history and help each other produce better work. And that kind of the myth of the lone genius is often undermined by the reality of, smart people getting ideas from other smart people who hang out at the same coffee shop. So to me, that's a great example of kind of like a timeless essay that I would go read, 10 years from now, and it would be just as relevant. Whereas the Twitter thing, might not be. So how have you thought about have you thought about how do you think about the timely? What are people talking about right now online versus kind of those timeless pieces that you can, share again in 10 years?
Totally. Yeah. That one I was forced to do and I wouldn't have finished had I not been. So I did after the Rite of Passage course. David Perel also put together a writing fellowship. And so I did that as part of the writing fellowship. So I picked this topic, super fascinating to me. I was launching this community, picked it maybe back in December, and it was the hardest. It was, an 11,000 word essay, and I write 3,000 to 4,000 words every week. But for some reason, this essay was just so ridiculously hard for me to write. But luckily, and I think you have this with Compound, and certainly we had it in the fellowship. Like there were 8 other people, I think, ultimately finished their essays, going through this together, meeting every week, pushing each other. I had, as part of that, my first chance to really work with a real editor who helped me kind of carry that through. So like all that to say, something like that is, I think, really valuable because you can keep referring back to it, and really hard to do when there's so many shiny things kind of popping around. I think one of my goals for the next, the back half of the year is to write a few more things like that that can be touchstones. But it's really hard to find the time when every Monday I really want to I'm on this pace right now where every Monday I'm delivering something that's kind of relevant to what's going on. So I need to probably just cut out everything else that I'm doing and spend time writing a couple more of the keystone pieces.
That's great. Have you noticed, I'm just curious because I know a lot of folks are thinking through this themselves. Have you noticed any difference in how it's contributed to kind of the growth in your readership? Do the timely pieces get a lot of attention? Has the Genius piece been great for getting folks back to read more of your stuff? Just curious quickly about if you've noticed a difference in the reaction you get from readers.
Um, I actually think so. A piece like the seniors piece has a longer lasting impact. And you said that, like, I'll still have people reach out and say that they loved the seniors piece and want to talk about something. Had somebody reach out the other day and was like, hey, do you want to come work with us and build out seniors here? And so that feels like it serves more as like almost a resume type piece. But I actually think for growth, the more timely ones that people are sharing because it's an interesting take on something that they were talking about or maybe thinking about themselves. I think those have been actually better contributors to overall growth. So like the seniors pieces build up this really solid base, and then the more timely stuff accelerates the growth.
Yeah, it's excellent. Awesome. So that's a perfect segue into something that, again, I think everybody is trying to figure out for themselves and just kind of evolves over time. But you mentioned a little bit around like how you pick ideas. To me, what I kind of heard you say is like, where's my maximum energy? What am I really fired up about, Thursday morning, Friday morning? And so I think that's probably a framework that a lot of other folks on the call probably use as they pick ideas. I'm curious kind of like what happens after that, right? If you maybe don't have a bunch of research on a topic, how do you go from a Thursday morning being excited about Twitter's subscription potential feature to like a 3,000 word essay that you're scheduling to go out Monday morning?
It's like a little bit of a roller coaster every week. And if we got my wife on the call, she would tell you that like she'll look at me on Saturday morning. She's like, oh my God, you're so stressed. Because I come into everything because I get really excited about this idea and I won't shut up about it. She has to hear about it 20 times. I start thinking about it and start pulling different things. Generally, I'll try to find evidence that like contradicts what I'm saying. To like just see, is this a really dumb point, or has somebody said this thing already in a better way than I might say it, or just kind of said it and it's going to be repetitive for me to write it. So it really, like, I've tried every note-taking system. I had a bunch of kind of structured Notion docs. And I want to get good at Rome. I feel like there's potential there, but I've not figured it out yet. But really, it's just I open up a Google Doc and I'll just start searching Twitter, searching Google, searching my inbox because maybe somebody else has written a newsletter about it recently, and just start kind of dumping the different sources of information. I'll have a random idea, and maybe it has to do with Twitter's market size or something, and so I'll start building a mini model. Like, it's really just about playing with the different pieces of what it might become until kind of some sort of structure around the essay emerges. Then I try to write a shitty first draft, and some sections I'll be able to write out as much as, like a really fully baked section. Generally, the intros are always bad, and I always get the same feedback on the intros in the middle of them, that like I don't tell the reader what's coming at all. And so like I should at some point be smart enough to figure out like I'm going to get this feedback. I might as well just put that in there from the start, but I don't. And then some sections I'll just leave as bullets. And then typically by hopefully Saturday afternoon, luckily I have a younger brother who enjoys editing the stuff, a sister who's like kind of mean. So if I like really am worried about an essay, I'll send it to her as well. And then my wife, who is not as into this stuff as I am. And so she's my test on like, I don't need her to give me nits or anything like that, but she'll tell me like, I fell asleep in this section, for example, and then I'll try to cut that section. So it's like my brother, who's as into this stuff as I am, my sister, who's going to tell me I'm just an idiot for even thinking about writing about this topic, and I need to find a whole new angle. And then my wife, who will tell me like, for the vast majority of your audience who doesn't care about this stuff as much as you do, here's where it gets really, really boring, or here's where I want more explanation. So having that team is amazing. At some point, I'm sure they'll get sick of every weekend me being like, have you read it yet? Have you read it yet? But for now it works. And then I'll take all that feedback back and spend most of Sunday, typically writing until like 10 p.m. on Sunday night. And then Monday morning doing last final edits. Substack, and I'm sure a lot of other email tools will tell you when you've gone too long and your email is going to get cut off. Every time I dump from Google Docs into Substack, it says the post is too long. So then I spend like Sunday night and Monday morning cutting things. And sometimes I just give up and I'm like, my open rates are going to be totally messed up this week because there's just no way to get this thing down. But we'll try to like spend the last time just cutting it down and then send it out.
Yeah. And so I love what you said about how you have this small group of folks who know you very well, first of all, and maybe are willing to give you the salty truth when you need to hear it. But it's great to hear how you found some folks to give you thoughtful feedback and all maybe have an angle that they approach pieces with. And, something that we've thought a lot about at Compound is like cultivating that community for everybody, kind of creating an immediate network of folks you can plug in. Some people who are great at just copy editing and doing that really well. Some people who are great at writing a killer introduction. Some people who are great at storytelling and narrative. And so I'm really curious how you think about that feedback and like how you've incorporated how much maybe pieces have changed because of the feedback you've gotten. If readers' feedback really morphs the work that you produce. Because I think it's funny, like there's a lot of talk about like how to write and how to, writing tips, if you will. But I think what often gets overlooked is this feedback and editing side of the process. So yeah, I'm just maybe curious to hear you elaborate just a bit more on how those edits and how that feedback kind of changes your work.
Totally. So yeah, through the fellowship, I got to work with an editor, and that was the first time that, before that I hadn't even had my brother and sister really edit too often. And then I had this guy, Tom White, who I was able to work with, who took just this hunk of garbage that I put on the page and over months patiently helped me shape it by like, he was really good at calling out where I was being lazy and where it was unclear and where like a whole section didn't make sense. And a couple of months into the project, he was like, dude, honestly, I think our best bet here is for you to totally start over. And I was like trying to write it with a group of people because it was about Genius. And so I thought it'd be cute to do something where I had a group of people contributing to the essay. And he was like, I'm sorry to tell you this, but like, you're just clearly getting too much input here. And so you need to just like kind of go into the zone, stop accepting kind of outside input and just go for it. So that was all incredibly valuable. And so it just kind of made me appreciate working with an editor. But I think I'm willing to throw out pretty much anything. Like this week in the Twitter piece, I had a structure to the essay. It didn't work. And so on Saturday morning, I threw it out and kind of started over. And you can take pieces of it, but really like I'm more than happy to take input and say like, this is an incredibly boring way to start the piece, or you're really good up to the middle. And then like, what are you doing with it? And so I think having sections that you can move around fairly easily is really helpful because you don't want to throw everything out on Sunday night. I just wouldn't be able to finish it, but very open to one, just like cutting as much as humanly possible, two, rearranging things as much as possible. And then three, understanding that like the point of this isn't for me to be done writing. The point of this is for me to write something that people actually enjoy reading. And so if it means that I wake up on Sunday morning and all three of the people have read it and said that it's not very good, that I need to spend just all day in a whole no distractions kind of reworking that. And then I think, so that's more specific to each piece. And then there's some recurring themes, like your intro is always bad. And then reader feedback, I think is really good because like people will call me out generally. Like one of the dangerous things about writing and writing about business strategy in particular is that every topic that I'm coming at, like 2 weeks ago, I wrote about education. And so people who actually know what they're talking about in terms of like the guts of working in the education system, or they have kids in school or different things like that, are going to know pretty clearly that I kind of know about education and I know enough to write something, but I don't know nearly as much as them. So a lot of the reader feedback, like I kind of keep that in the back of my mind that I need to at least come across as humble enough to know that, or like to let people know that I'm trying something new here and playing with a new field, because I'm not going to be the expert in everything that I write about.
Yeah, first of all, we have Tom.
Oh, Tom.
Yeah.
I didn't even see you there.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, it's funny. I love the point you made about like just having to do the hard work of killing your darlings, whatever the language is. And so just epic that Tom's actually here. So this is, yeah, I am just curious, is there, at this point, have you kind of removed the ego element and it's not too hard for you to go in Saturday and just, get rid of the stuff that you loved on Friday, but maybe isn't working now? Because I think it can be a tough thing, I think, for people to do.
100%. But now, like, I just feel like every week I need to raise the bar a little bit because like people are subscribing and it's weird. And so like I'll see, and I remember this from the early days of Breather, you'd see somebody sign up and like we saw every email address of someone who created an account or made a booking. And I'd be like, oh my God, that person made a reservation. Like we have to make sure that the space is spotless for them. And now I have the same thing happen where like certain people will subscribe and I'm like, well, shit, now actually has to be good on Monday. And so if that means throwing out whole sections or whole essays or anything, like I feel like there's so much. And even though, like, you know, people are going to read this stuff and think about it for 10 minutes and that's it. Like, I definitely am in my head on how much people actually care generally. And I think that's good advice broadly, is to realize that, like, if you write something great, you could really, you know, change the way somebody thinks about something. If you write something bad, nobody's really going to care for that long. Let the pressure off a little bit, but certainly a long way of saying that it's less about the ego and the particular sections that I really like, and more about making sure that I'm sending something that I'm excited to send to the group of people that have, like, kind of trusted me with their email addresses.
Yeah, I actually love that framing of, like, it's almost the duty to the reader to get out of your own way and kind of refine the work. So I think that's really awesome framing. Treat them like a customer, because, you know, they are, right?
Totally.
Yeah, it's killing. Well, I know we're going to switch to the Q&A in a second. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to keep dropping them in the Q&A. We have a few questions from the group that I'll have regardless, but start typing in your questions now, because we'll switch over in maybe like a couple minutes. I'll do one or two more questions. Well, the final thing I wanted to cover, which I think is, like, just been remarkable to watch from a distance, is the utterly amazing growth of the newsletter, from writing very consistently for about a year, you know, building up a very loyal but small following of, you know, a few hundred folks, which I think is actually, it's like that's actually bigger than most people realize. It's pretty awesome to have a few hundred people reading your stuff consistently. But now you've, like, 10x that. So I'm just curious to hear about that journey, and how you would encourage people who are maybe have been consistently writing, but maybe haven't quite done the marketing piece. How would you go about kind of, you know, advising them on growing their list?
Totally. So I think it happened the right way. If you look at the graph, like, one of the things about growing slowly is that the graph looks a lot more impressive at the end if you start growing quickly after a year of not growing at all. But the really good thing about that year is that it was mostly friends and family and people that I knew. And so I could be completely experimental with what I was writing about. And some weeks I'd just drop a few links in and talk about them. Some weeks I'd write a long form piece on community. Some weeks I'd announce that I'm starting this club or whatever. And because it's friends and family, I wouldn't get too many unsubscribes from doing that. Now, if I send something out talking about a referral program, I'll get an email back that's like, I don't care that you're doing this referral program. So, like, it's definitely, you know, it's still fairly friendly, but less friendly now. So I'm glad that I had a year of not writing to people that I didn't really know. But I think, you know, decided at some point in April, particularly when the quarantine hit and I had to hit pause on the Not Boring Club, made an effort to change the name, pick the thing that I was going to write about, and get more consistent with it. And I think, you know, one of the things that is frustrating about writing advice is that really it's like just doing the work. And so, like, the most important thing that I did, more than any single tactic, was pick the type of topic that I was going to be writing about and just do that consistently and try to elevate the level each time that I wrote. And then things kind of flow from that. So, like, I'm able to be more active on Twitter, which feels weird still, but certainly felt weird for the first year. And then more recently of being a little bit self-promotional and just talking about the stuff that I was writing about. But because Not Boring is a little bit fun, I get to have fun with it on Twitter, and, like, I can be myself. So it's easy to kind of talk about it and engage in conversations around the topics that I'm interested in. We launched a referral program, which so far I think has generated about 600 subscribers. So 10% of all the subscribers have come from that. We launched on Product Hunt, which I highly recommend to everybody. Like, once you're ready and once you have that kind of early loyal base, we just put together a landing page in a couple of days and then launched on Product Hunt. Because you have this amazing resource, which is a list of people who at least kind of care about you and what you're doing, you're able to kind of direct people there. And so I think, you know, of the 6,500 subscribers, 2,000 came from launching on Product Hunt and getting to number 2. But that's not possible without, you know, that year probably of building up people who, like, have seen the journey and understand that there's, like, that I've been, like, struggling on this for a year. So all of that. I think one other just kind of meta thing that's worked really well is just being open with it. So I started sharing kind of, like, that I wanted to grow this thing from the time that I had probably about 100 subscribers. And then if I got to like 200, I'd be like, hell yeah, this is amazing. Like, thank you so much, everybody. Because I genuinely like was incredibly excited that those things were happening. In the beginning, because I was a little bit shy about it, I would just put a little button at the bottom that was like, hey, if you like this, like, please share. And then one time I brought that up higher in the newsletter and was like, hey, could you guys help me? I'm like, I spent a lot of time writing this. Could you like just please share this with some people? And they actually do. And so that was, up to that point, the biggest day of signups. And then from there, it's just been this thing where I'm very open about the things that I'm trying and why I'm trying them and, why I write on Substack and like all of these, like I try to let people in on the process. I think it also kind of works because, a lot of the things that I write about are either these really, really, really big companies or really, really, really small companies, both of which are kind of possible to do online in a profitable way. And so I use Not Boring as like, here are tactics that I'm using on this newsletter that you can also use for small businesses generally. So I'm going to, just be open about the things that I'm doing. And I think that's made people feel more bought in.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like so much of your story is the effect of compounding. You put in that work over the year, you built up that loyal following of whatever size, and then now you can really, they're kind of the support base for everything you do, which is really awesome to see. So with 25 minutes on the clock, we have the Q&A has lit up. So we're going to start going through these. So everyone, you're welcome to keep submitting questions, and we'll get to as many as we can before the end of the hour. What I'll do is I will promote everybody who's asked a question kind of one by one to a panelist. So I don't think your camera will turn on. You're welcome to if you'd like, but you can unmute and ask your question. And Kyle, I think I answered yours. I use no beard products. But Jess, if you're up for it, I will promote you here. And I think you had a question around writing and visuals. So let me find you and let's see. Allow to talk. Cool.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thanks for doing this today. So I appreciate the way that you incorporate pop culture, because that's how I best synthesize complex ideas too. And some of my best ideas come when I'm not at my computer or phone, like in the shower or running, or when I'm trying to stay focused on what a person is saying, but I start thinking about the idea in my head anyway.
Yep.
And so how do you, I'm assuming that happens to you too. And if not, I'm hoping you'll bear with me and give me advice on how to capture those fleeting gems and how it fits into your overall workflow.
Yeah, so I wish I had a better workflow in general. I think that's probably one theme of this is that, there's all ways of doing this. Like there's the whole building a second brain group of people who are very organized about it. And then me, I've used every possible thing for your particular question. Like there's very, very, very many times when my wife will be talking or a friend will be talking, but my wife catches me more in this where she's like, oh, you're thinking about the essay, right? And so like in the middle of a conversation, I'll have like a really clever idea. And so I capture it in a few different ways. One, I'll send myself an email and I won't open that email. I'm neurotic about responding to notifications and just clicking on things, but I won't open that email until I get back to my computer, and then I'll see if I still like it then, if it's worth actually kind of digging into. I'll do the same thing with Slack and Slack reminders. So I'll just send myself a message in Slack to remind me of it in an hour. Right now I'm in my in-laws' house and my office setup is in the basement. And so sometimes like it'll be 10 o'clock, we'll be about to go to bed, and I'll have an idea and I'll be like, all right, I just need to come back, like give me 15 minutes, and I'll walk down the flights of stairs, walk down to the basement, and just kind of get like a rough version of that idea down. And then when I have more time to like actually sit with something, one, make sure that that's something that was still interesting and fits in the context of what I'm doing. And if it is, then actually like flesh that out, see where it fits, and then see how the piece fits with that image or that idea in there.
Great, thank you.
So thanks, Jess. Great to see you. So, Sarah, I am going to promote you here. And let's see. Still learning how to best do this. All right. Cool. So, Sarah, you should come live now.
All right. You guys hear me?
Can.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for doing this. I'm enjoying the newsletter a lot. My question is, these are pretty titanic posts, as you say, like 3,000, 4,000 words. I'm just curious if you've thought about doing shorter or, or condensed versions of the longer posts, or do you really feel like the long form is what people come for, and what is, I don't know, like what is most impactful in this format?
Yeah, I don't have a good counterfactual here because I end up writing pretty much everything at that length, and pretty much it's dictated by how much I can do before Substack will cut me off. I would love to try a shorter one time, and pretty much every week I go into it saying that I'm going to do a shorter one this week, and then it just ends up being about that length. I'm sure that some things would be more shareable and easier for people to kind of consume if I made them shorter. And I'd actually love your thoughts on whether you'd like to hear or you'd like to read some shorter pieces. But it's more, I think it would take me even more time to make what I write shorter, to try to pack as much into 2,000 words as I do into 3,500 words. So that's kind of where they end up. I started recording kind of audio versions of each of them because I know that it's a lot for some people to read, but I would love one week to be able to just do a couple 1,000-word piece and call it a day. But I'd love your thoughts on if you'd like some shorter stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I personally would like it just because I don't know. I mean, I think it probably depends on what your media diet is in general, but I do read a lot, and so I find, it's the kind of thing where you open the browser tab to read it all, and you never get to it. And so that's where for me, and for I mean, just on a selfish level, I'm like, well, what's the sweet spot? Is it 3,000 words, or is it more? I would say my stuff is mostly like 1,000 to 1,500 tops. So really just kind of, it's kind of like what holds people's attention, and weighing that with what delivers most value.
Yeah, I think it'd be a fun thing to experiment with for sure. I try to do Twitter threads on everything that I write so that there's at least a more consumable, quick way to get to the information. But I think there's also something to picking your style and sticking with it. Like Fred Wilson can say more in 100 words than I can say in 3,000 words. And that's amazing that he has that style. But I think part of it is now like that's just become the way that I write. And so keeping some sort of consistency, even if it means maybe limiting the growth a little bit, is valuable for now. But to your point, I'd love to at some point, and maybe that means, hiring somebody to condense at some point if I ever make money off of this thing. But I'd love to be able to give more condensed versions and just different ways to interact with the material.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. I can't hear you.
Whoops, sorry about that. I said, great question, Sarah. I'm waiting for the not boring TikTok so I want 15-second videos.
Have you seen, so Brett Goldstein, who does tech Twitter TLDR and just launched something called Social Studies, has experimented with condensing a bunch of like tech articles down to TikToks.
That is amazing. We'll see. Until the government shuts it down, we got to run.
Yeah, enjoy it while you can.
Right. Awesome. So actually, this is perfect foray into Josh Mitchell. I'm going to promote you, Josh. I think you had a question around kind of the business model. Oh, whoops. I made you a panelist. So welcome to the panel.
Welcome to the panel, Josh.
Tell me if you can, are you able to unmute? Let's see. If not, here, I'm gonna switch you up, Josh. One sec. All right. Zoom appears to be stuck here. So, oh, there we go. Josh, you able to unmute? There we go.
Cool. Hey, hi, Packy. My name is Josh. I figured I would ask, what are your plans for money? Like, how do you plan on making money short-term, long-term, pricing structures? Would love to hear you elaborate on that.
Yeah, this is something that I've thought a lot about because I went from a well-paying job at a tech company to making $0 writing a newsletter and have a kid on the way in October. So my wife also wants to know how, has the same question that you do, I think. And for me, the plan was, I think, get to about 2,500 people and then start charging. And, if you newsletters convert to paid anywhere between kind of 5 and 10%, depending on your pricing. Then I can get 250 people paying and $10 a month. It's not life-changing money, but something. Decided not to do that though for a couple of reasons. One, I'm enjoying the growth too much, and I think I'm writing pieces that I think are generally shareable, and I for right now like having the ability to have those shared, not just for the growth, because I think it's really fun if I'm going to put 30 hours into writing something for not just to go to an audience of 250 people. And two, just because the faster that I think I can get to a big number, the more options I have. I think instead of going paid for right now, the most recent thinking that I have is once I get to about 10,000 people, I'll start turning on sponsorships. And so I have an audience that I think is fairly valuable and fairly unique. I think I've heard the Financial Times has the highest kind of CPMs of any publication at about 360, which is insane. And I don't have that audience, but I think I'm probably somewhere between that and like your standard $50 to $75 CPM. So if I can get $100 to $150 CPMs on a 10,000 person audience and I write twice a week, it ends up looking pretty good. I think I would just do a sponsored post versus I just don't leave myself enough room to do too much more advertising. So I think sponsors is certainly one way. At some point, if I can figure out how to make my process more efficient, I'll have a paid aspect of it. And maybe that is more condensed versions. Maybe that is if I'm building models behind the scenes for what I end up writing, releasing the models and like some of the more kind of technical stuff. And then probably a community aspect as well. And then one of the things that I'm experimenting with, I did kind of the first test run of this last week, is I wrote an investment memo on an early stage startup and then sent people to a friend of mine's syndicate. So they can invest potentially in the round and the syndicate leader gets carry on that. That's a longer term play, just like compounding the list and everything else, but got a lot of good feedback on that. And so I think I'm going to start a syndicate because a lot of my audience are in tech investors, people who have money but don't have access to startup deals. And so I think actually a syndicate format works really well, where I can take a kind of complex company idea. Last week was about this natively integrated apartment developer that uses software and zoning laws to build low-rise apartment buildings. And so I can take that kind of hairy concept and explain it better and then let people invest. I think that's kind of a fun way to do it. And so thinking about different things like that, where I can monetize in a way that's kind of unique to the things that I'm writing about in the audience that I have. Another way, I've talked to a couple companies about potentially doing like almost an ETF or like a fund about the companies that I write about that people can invest in, and I would get potentially carry on that. So who knows if I'll do that. I also probably should talk to a lawyer at some point and see if I'm triggering any SEC issues with any of this. But I think there are ways to do it that are super aligned with the content that are more exciting than just like the two options that every writer seems to have, which is ads or paid.
Cool. Thank you. That was really elaborate response. Appreciate it.
I never can go short. So that includes my responses.
Awesome. Great question. All right. Thank you, Josh. I think so. I think Charlotte said that she has a crying baby with her. So I'm going to ask her a question that she typed in. And the question was, how do you ideate your stories? I don't know if you wanted to maybe elaborate a little bit on what we talked about earlier, but yeah, how do you kind of ideate the stuff you end up writing about?
Yeah, so I spend too much time online, too much time reading other newsletters, too much time on Twitter. And so certain stories will pop up that generally kind of fit into a few of the different frameworks that I keep a running list of in my mind. And if something pops up that I think that I have a unique perspective on, then that's one way that I do it. Another way might be just companies that I'm personally obsessed with that I don't think are getting kind of a fair shake in the market. And so Slack was one of those. And so for a couple of months, my brother and I would just be like, we both own shares in Slack, and we were both incredibly frustrated with the narrative around the company. And so finally I was like, I just need to write this thing. And so it's a combination of either there's something in the news or there's something that I can't get out of my head. And then, the same kind of editorial team, my brother, my sister, and my wife, I'll also throw ideas against and see if they think that they're interesting enough to write about. And then, I work with a friend of mine named Tommy on this, who's also super smart and interested in the same things that I am. And so I'll throw, on Tuesday or Wednesday, I'll be like, so like, what are we writing about? And so I'll throw ideas against him and see, and he'll throw ideas in as well.
Awesome. Cool. So I think next up is Ross. Ross, if you're on the call, I'll promote you to talk here. And I think Ross had a question around like the Substack versus ConvertKit, kind of like email toolkit. So take it away, Ross.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for doing this. Great to meet you both. So my question's around Substack versus what a lot of other creators are using, like a ConvertKit or something similar. So just curious around how you're thinking about Substack in relation to some of these other options for, I guess, some of the larger newsletters or larger creators, and how you're thinking about migrating either in that direction or not at all.
Yeah, this is another one of those questions that's consumed a lot of my mind space, and Tommy and I have talked about a lot, particularly because we want to do things to help grow the audience. So we launched a referral program. We had to build a landing page so we have actually like our own domain to tell our story on, and our own place to share old articles and to explain a little bit more than you can on Substack. Right now, we're kind of just hacking things in Substack's orbit and then sending people back to Substack. The way that our referral program and our landing page work is that at the end of each day, I'll pull down emails from each one, dump them into a Google Sheet, and then dump them into Substack, and then vice versa. When people sign up via Substack to get them a referral code, then we take them out of Substack and we dump that into GrowSurf, which we use for referrals. All that to say, there are a lot of things that we do to kind of hack it and stick with Substack. I just did Substack because I was told to in Rite of Passage, and I really like it. It's easy, it's clean. There's a lot of, I probably wouldn't have written as much without Substack being so easy, but I'm definitely considering a switch. I don't know if that's going to be to something like a ConvertKit, or if that'll be building something ourselves, or what that ends up looking like. Potentially MailChimp. Like, I haven't thought through that next step. I've thought through it a lot. I haven't gotten to the final conclusion quite yet, but I think the main things that I'm looking for are easy integrations to other tools, and then a really clean writing interface. Those are the two kind of big things. And Whereby, good call, Jess, I spoke to yesterday, they are working on some really cool things as well. I think one thing that's going to bite Substack is their anti-ad stance. I think, for a newsletter writer to be able to monetize in whatever way you possibly can, that works for your brand is a really good thing. And so Whereby is building an ad network that eventually will be kind of self-serve. I think that's a real big missed opportunity on Substack's part right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the answer.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah, great question. I think that's something people are constantly trying to figure out, and just has evolved so much in the last couple of years. Awesome. Actually, another very timely question. Ben, I'm going to promote you. I think you have a question around, Substack fatigue, subscription fatigue. So I think that is definitely top of mind and top of Twitter right now. So feel free to take it away.
Basically, as the question says, do you think it seems like the last year has been a really good time to start Substack or other newsletters, but do you think people are going to get a bit sick of that if they subscribe to 10, 20, 50 newsletters going forward?
Yeah, I mean, as someone who subscribes to 10, 20, or 50, I definitely am at the point where there's some people that I'll read every single time their email gets to my inbox, and there's some people who I'll certainly look at the subject line and see if it's something that I'm interested in exploring more. I don't know. I think there's definitely a bubble on Twitter, and I'm not good at breaking out of it. Most of the people who subscribe to Not Boring found it on Twitter or on Twitter, and so I haven't practiced what I've preached here. But I also think the number of people that's even ever seen a tweet that I've tweeted is maybe 0.0001% of the world population, and of the people in America. So I think there's a very small group of people who subscribes to a ton of newsletters, but a lot of people are writing about things that would be interesting to a broader group. My mom's friends will read the newsletter now, and they're actually really into the things that I'm writing about because they've heard of Twitter, they've heard of Snapchat, they want to learn more about it. So figuring out how to get to that next level of people who don't subscribe to 50 newsletters. I think it's going to be something that differentiates the people who can get really, really big and the people who end up kind of competing for those same 50,000 eyeballs.
Yeah, good answer. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, it's a great point. It's easy to forget how insular, how much Twitter is kind of a small world, even though there's still millions of people on there. It's actually kind of a small world, relatively speaking.
Totally.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. I'm feeling the subscription fatigue myself.
Yeah.
So, okay, Nick, I'm going to promote you to talk. And I think you had a question around open rates, click rates, kind of engagement. So feel free to unmute if you're able to.
What's up, Nick?
Hey, Packy, how's it going? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, cool. Just curious if you're comfortable sharing like how your click rates, open rates have changed as you've grown your audience.
Yeah. So I have a bit of a good cop-out answer here, which is recently I've started writing even longer. And so my tracking pixel is at the bottom of the email in Substack. And so the longer I write, the less of a chance there is that it's properly tracking. So some of my recent essays have had, 20% open rates and like 80% click-through rates, which is not what they've actually had, but that's just what happens when the pixel's messed up and it has to track based on who clicked. The ones that I write that are shorter are still they're still in like the 55 to 60% range by, call it a week out when I write it. Certainly, like I see this pattern where I get an open rate in the morning that's probably close to 30%. Then it trickles to 40 throughout the day. And then I kind of go from 40 to 50 in the evening because a lot of people have just saved it because they are such long pieces. So they'll save it for a point when they have a little bit more time. But for a while there, I'd say my open rates were about, 60 to 68%. And now they're probably closer to the 55 to 60% range. And then my click rates have gone down dramatically because my format before was a lot of like links and listens that I was sending people external. And now I have things linked within what I'm writing, but there are very few points when I'm like, please go read this particular thing. So I've gone from kind of the 30% range to the 15 to 20% range.
Cool. That's super helpful.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. And I think we've got about 4 minutes or so on the clock here. So we'll try to get through, we'll do some rapid fire. Maybe we'll stick around for an extra minute or two, but football guys, I'm assuming that's not your God-given name. So I'll try to make a guess here, but football guys has a question around the referral program you set up, which was really spectacular. And feel free to unmute and take it away.
Thank you. Yeah, not my given name. Joe's my name. And thanks for doing this, guys. Just to kind of follow up, you touched on it some, Packy. Just have you found a software or a plan or other things too? How have you incentivized that to get people to share? We're in a business where people are incentivized not to share our content. We're fantasy football information, so we've got a little struggle there. So that's always been a challenge for us, how we get people to share.
Yeah, so we use a program called GrowSurf, and there's a few, but GrowSurf is kind of just what we just do. I think, so Tommy, who I'm working on this with now, found them, and he's like kind of responsible for that and the landing page that we're doing. So we built GrowSurf and integrated it into a Webflow landing page that we built with the help of a designer / coder / genius named James McNabb, who helped us out there. But GrowSurf is super easy. I think the thing that I like about it is that you can just plug it in with a bit of JavaScript into a page. People will get their unique link and then they can share it out, and there's a leaderboard. So I think, we at 10, we call somebody out in the newsletter and we link to their company if they want that. At 20, we give somebody a sticker, and at 30, we give somebody a t-shirt that is in the middle of being designed right now. But I think really the motivation for people sharing is more the leaderboard than it is the t-shirt or the stickers. It's either the leaderboard or just wanting to be helpful, and then the t-shirt or the sticker is like a nice touch. For something like a paid service that you don't want people sharing, it's probably interesting data that you're willing to have them share, or something like that, or some sort of images. But yeah, we're doing everything we can to make it shareable. So one of the reasons that I didn't ultimately decide to go paid actually is that I think, like, you know, for me right now, just growing is more valuable. But certainly a referral program is great, and because you're paid, you can probably offer better rewards for the people who get people to sign up than I can. So you can even, you know, offer monetary rewards, whatever else, that are higher value, because you know that the LTV of the customer is, call it, you know, $500.
Awesome. Hey, thank you. Rock on. You're talented.
Thank you, and appreciate you sharing yesterday.
Sure.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. And yeah, it looks like Jess also mentioned, let's see, Viral Loops is another referral service. So cool. So I know we're right on time. So if anyone has to bounce, obviously feel free. But Packy, if you're up for it, I think we could maybe do 2 or 3 more, and that would actually close it out.
Totally.
Awesome. So Kyle, if you're still on here, you are next up, and I'll go ahead and promote you here. And you can shoot.
Hey, what's up, guys? What's up, Packy?
How's it going?
Stu?
Hey.
It's going well. Hey, so guys, you know, look, I'm trying to figure out how to start writing long form. I've always had ghostwriters. So I run a company, I have about 100 employees. And I feel like I have this duty to start communicating my thoughts through long form writing, not just with my team, but with the public, you know, more so than just like quick Twitter posts. I mean, how do you start? How do you like, because I think part of my problem is that's like, I just don't know where to begin, right? Which is kind of funny because it's like, I've started companies and stuff. So I definitely like know how to start things, but it's just for some reason, this writing thing is so hard. Like I can't figure out how to just get going. So what do you recommend, Packy? Because obviously you're crushing it. So I'm so curious how you recommend I begin.
Yeah, I mean, so I think we're in a group right now, and I think that's the number one thing. Like I just was able to pick up a cadence by doing the Rite of Passage course, where every week we had an assignment that we had to have finished, and then we go to a breakout on a Zoom call. And if you're the guy who didn't complete something, you kind of look like an asshole. So I'd find some sort of an accountability group, and that could be compound writing. That could be a few of your friends who might want to write. But I would say give yourself an assignment and give yourself a deadline, and don't worry too much about the quality. Obviously, like everything is colored by what your goal is. And since yours is more professional and for your company, quality will matter a little bit more, I would assume, depending on what you're doing. But just set a goal and a deadline and have people hold you accountable. If it's somebody else who's writing as well, then it's not just like, you know, asking a friend to hold you accountable and they don't really care. But if you're holding somebody else accountable and they're holding you accountable, I think that's a really valuable way to start. So getting in a writing group, super valuable. I think that's the number one thing. And then if you have ghostwriters and, you know, you have some sort of writing apparatus set up, I'm assuming you have editors involved as well. I know Tom White, if you're still on the call, Tom is a fantastic editor and is going to be doing more editing work. So maybe you guys should connect, but just write what you want to write and then assume that you can edit that down either yourself or with a partner or with an editor later on. But just like, don't worry about quality as much the first time. Just get yourself a deadline and get it done.
It's super helpful, Packy. Thank you so much. And then just real quick, Stu, if I could just follow that up with, how do you really decide what to write about? I know you hit on this a little bit earlier in this interview, but I mean, how have you latched on to certain topics and really like chosen the route, right? Because I think it's another part of this is like, I have these ideas around, you know, team building or culture building, whatever, but they don't really ever kind of form in anything. I'm just kind of curious how you choose a topic and really run with that and know it's the right topic.
I would say I don't know it's the right topic almost ever. Like really this week, I'm not saying this to be like, oh, I can't. Like really this week, I thought my essay was dog shit on Sunday morning and that it was a topic that had been written about and that my perspective wasn't particularly unique on it or anything like that. And it's just about like, you know, nothing holds you more accountable than having this growing list of people that you need to send something to on Monday morning. So I just had to put in the time to get it done. And sometimes it'll hit and sometimes it won't hit to the same level. But I would say if it's interesting, if you're writing just to write because you feel like you have to for your company, then maybe that might not be the topic that you should pick. But if you think that there is something that you have insight into because you've started and run a 100% company and you have real insights that you don't think have been said before that you're really, really passionate about, then I think if you're passionate about it, you're going to find other people who are passionate about it too. If you're confused about it or at some point were, you'll find people who are confused about it or at some point were who will want to read it. So make sure it's actually interesting and you're doing it for the right reasons, not to sound too much like The Bachelor, but do it for the right reasons and be excited by it. And I think it'll hit.
Thank you so much, Packy. Really appreciate the time today.
Kyle,
Absolutely.
great to hear your voice, man. Hope Hawaii is awesome. I'm very jealous.
Thanks, Stu. It's beautiful out here.
Awesome, man. Cool. So let's see. I think we'll do two more. And Fabry, tell me if I'm pronouncing that right. I will promote you to talk. And I think you had a question around just building your brand kind of beyond writing. So if you're able to, you can go ahead and unmute and take the floor.
Yeah, you got it perfectly right. Yes, the idea is like, writing, clearly it's your kind of like your core. But when I read the investment memo, I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like, you could really translate that authority into other verticals. So beyond monetization, it's just the idea of like, where do you see this going? Where is it always going to be a written thing, or is it going to evolve into like different lines of products?
I want it to evolve into so many different lines of products. Like, I think my biggest issue is probably actually going to be focus. And I like having the newsletter as kind of the anchor that focuses that. But yeah, I mean, I definitely, and like some of this stuff just sounds cliche, but I think that there's an opportunity to start a more conversational, almost like sports talk radio, like podcast around it. I love the idea of kind of the syndicate and the investment memos because it's something that I'm passionate about and want to get more into anyway. I think there's really great opportunities to even like go e-commerce if you're, depending on what you're writing about. Like, I think that, online today, if you can build an audience and reach an audience without having to go through Google and Facebook, that's a really just incredible asset to have. And so, one of the reasons that I like writing is kind of this outlet for being not boring is that I can test things. Like I said, I wanted to do a syndicate. And if everybody had replied like, that's a really dumb idea, then I don't do a syndicate. And I've wasted a little bit of time and $0 trying that. And so without being so all over the place that I, lose trust and just seem kind of scattered, I think it's really interesting to like just have this ongoing conversation with the audience about what they'd be interested in kind of getting from you and then executing on that. So I think it's I'm all about the idea of like an audience first business. Yeah. And I want to, figure out as many ways that make sense and feed off of each other as I can possibly extend that.
Awesome. Love it. Yeah, cool. And keep it up. This was very interesting, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome, man. Glad to hear it. Thanks for the question. Cool. So I think we will wrap up. Tyler, if you are still on the line, the floor is yours. I think Tyler had a question around like distribution, how to avoid ever falling into something that seems like spammy or overly self-promotional. But Tyler, feel free to unmute and take the floor.
Yeah. Thanks, Packy, for your time and super interesting, and love the newsletter.
Thank you.
Really just curious what you have found to be the most successful distribution methods. I mean, obviously you kind of popped when you had your landing page hit the top of Product Hunt, and that was really cool to see. But I'm curious, like earlier on in the life cycle of your newsletter, what did you find to be the most successful distribution methods as you kind of grew to where you are now?
Yeah, I think it depends, and it's all about trying a bunch of different things. And kind of like for me, it was all about getting over this ego and this fear that I had. But at one point it was, as I mentioned, like when I asked the audience asked like the readers to share, and that really helped. And that was to that point my biggest day. At another point, it was the first time that I finally like got over myself and posted on LinkedIn. That became my biggest day. There was another time that I had a guest poster, Ali Montag, who's incredible and has written for Not Boring a couple of times. She wrote about Kim Kardashian, and I posted it in the Keeping Up with the Kardashians subreddit. And that got like, more likes than I've gotten on Reddit. I'm not good at Reddit, but more likes than anything else I've gotten on Reddit, and got a bunch of subscribers. And so it's about finding like where each piece of your content might pop and then trying it. And not being afraid to try a bunch of different things. Product Hunt was certainly big. Even just, having kind of a cadence without trying to be too formulaic, because I don't like when people are like very clearly formulaic on Twitter, but I'll tweet every time I write an article. I'll even like this week I was thinking about the Twitter article, asked a question that Paul Graham ended up responding to. And so that tweet blows up and it's related to the topic. And so then I can like follow up on that tweet that I wrote the thing tonight I'll do a thread on that post, and so like that'll get a second wave of people. But I think it's really about just like, for me at least, it was about getting over the fear of having like being too all over the place, like because you live in your own social feeds, and so like I think that I'm tweeting way too much, and some people might also definitely agree with that. But then I'll have friends who are also on Twitter a lot, and they're like, oh, I didn't realize until I read your piece that Paul Graham replied. And I was like, what do you mean? That was like the biggest thing that happened in the past 24 hours, but I'm seeing all the replies to Paul Graham. They're not. So I think it's about realizing that like you can't be annoying and spammy, but people are probably not seeing you nearly as much as you think they're seeing you.
Oh, that's great. Awesome. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Tyler. Awesome. Yeah, I think we'll wrap up. And I just want to thank everybody who showed up. I want to thank Pat for all the awesome questions. What we're going to do is put together a recording, and most likely we'll put together a transcript of the call, and we'll email it out to everybody who signed up. So there's just, I was taking my own notes here, and I have like 5 pages of notes. So there's a ton of great wisdom and advice. So Packy, thank you for sharing all the hard-won lessons.
Absolutely. This is amazing. Thank you for having
Awesome.
me.
And then I just wanted to wrap up and say, first thing, like Packy mentioned, he's launching a syndicate. He's kind of experimenting with a syndicate idea where he'll pull together some investors, write about really interesting early stage startups that he's seeing. So if people are interested in that, Packy, what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, so you can
talk about.
Yeah, so you can email me at Packy, PACKYMCC@gmail.com, or I'm at PackyM on Twitter, or subscribe to notboring.substack.com, and once we launch this thing, we'll certainly be sending out a post about the syndicate. But I think that's going to be a lot of fun. I have no idea if I'm going to get myself in trouble with the SEC, so I need to talk to a lawyer. If anybody has advice there, let me know. But I think it's a cool way to tell early stage companies stories. And so if you have one of those, let me know. And if you're interested in investing, let me know.
Awesome. And if this recording is being played in a court of law years later, he is seeking legal counsel, trying to do the right thing. So now that's on tape. But that's awesome. So subscribe to Not Boring, reply to Packy. And then for anybody who's in Compound writing, Packy's going to join the Slack and going to join Compound. So you'll see him there in the next few days. And we're thrilled to maybe get an occasional early look at some work. But thank you so much for everybody who showed up. This was a blast. And Packy, thanks again for your time, man.
Thank you. This was so much fun. Thanks everybody for coming. See you in the Slack.
Amazing. See y'all.